Welcome to another episode of Preparing for the Unexpected. I'm your host, Alex Fullick, and as always, we like to talk about things related to business continuity, crisis management, emergency management, COVID, well-being, anything that helps you, your organization, or your community prepare for, respond to, and overcome adverse situations. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, please feel free, reach out. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Alex Fullick there, so I'm really easy to find, and I do respond to everything I get. One quick announcement. I will be speaking at the Continuity Insights Conference this year. It's next year, 2022, April 25th to 27th in Louisville, Kentucky. So hopefully we'll see some of you there and maybe get some of the speakers on the show. Speaking of which, the recent Business Continuity Institute BCI World Virtual 2021 had a lot of great speakers. And I've said before that with these conferences, I always like to see if we can get some of those speakers to come on the show and talk about their presentation or something else. And today is actually one of those days. Today, I'd like to welcome to the show on the topic of what opportunities we have in our industry to stay relevant. And I'd like to welcome to the show, Alexandra Hoffmann. Alexandra, welcome.
Hello, Alex. Thank you so much for having me on the show today. I'm extremely grateful for this, and I'm grateful that we had an opportunity to meet through the BCI conference. Thank you.
Yes, my pleasure. I'm glad you accepted my offer to come on the show. Now, I know you and I have had a chat already before, so we know a little bit about each other, but we've got people literally around the globe that listen and watch the show. So can you take a minute or two and tell us about yourself, what you do, and how you got into what you do?
Yes, sure, Alex. Thank you. So I'm Alexandra Hoffmann. I am the CEO of Crisis Ally, which is my company, which I set up 3 years ago. Originally, it was Alexandra Hoffmann Consulting, and then I changed the brand and the name last June because I wanted to make it more global and more open to more diversity and more global work, like I said. And I've technically been in the security and resilience industry for 20 years, my entire career, basically. And I decided to join that industry right after 9/11. That was really what got me to join that industry. At first, I wanted to join the French police forces. And eventually, when 9/11 happened, I was myself living and working in Hong Kong at the time, and working every day in a high-rise building and being extremely conscious of what it is to work with those businesses. I was like, who's protecting those companies, basically, and businesses working in those offices, right? And this is really when the shift happened in my head at that moment. And I basically made the decision to focus on corporate security right then and there. And that's when I basically took a flight to New York to get trained on corporate security. That's it. And that's all I've been doing ever since.
And here we are today.
Yes.
Now, you're obviously joining us from France, right?
Yes, I am. Yes, I'm based in France. I've lived and traveled to many countries, but now I'm based in France.
And I'm in Canada, so we've got a big transatlantic call going on right now. So welcome to the show, Alexandra. Now, we are going to talk about what opportunities we have in our industry to stay relevant. Now, that's a pretty big topic, and I know something that a lot of people are talking about now, showing value, et cetera, et cetera. What are one of the ways, one of the things that you want to let people know how we can, what is one of those opportunities? Let's say I won't go too far because I may accidentally step on some toes here. So what are your key points?
So, the minute I know that we exchanged some bullet points before, but really hearing you asking the question right now, the key point that comes to my mind is about learning. So to me, the best way to stay relevant in our industry, but also in any industry, is to be willing to learn and unlearn every day. And I think it's a bit tricky because in our industry, and I've been guilty of that myself sometimes, we are experts at what we do. We've been doing most of, people I know, peers that I know from afar or in France, we've been in that job for many years. Sometimes we've done the job in the public industry, sometimes the private industry, in the humanitarian sector, all of these areas. And because of that, we have become experts. But like the Buddhist says, becoming an expert and coming to anything with an expert mind is actually a huge trap, because then we don't ask the right questions anymore, and we actually forget to ask questions sometimes, right? So I think the big key, if we want to stay relevant, is to come back today, especially today with the, what's going on with the COVID, come back with a beginner's mind and say, okay, how can I start fresh here? How can I learn and unlearn what I know and do things differently? And I know a lot more people are now open to this, because I was actually having conversations like this recently with the prospect who was saying to me, if we have to change everything that we're doing, I'm completely fine with that. But I want us to get ready and to be set to do this, right? So really, it's about unlearning and learning, I think.
Now, when we're saying learning, are we saying taking training courses? Are we talking lessons learned from our job experiences? Like, how do you define learning and relearning?
I think it's a bit of everything, Alex, to be honest with you. It's about taking when it's appropriate and when it suits someone to take those courses. Sometimes it can be to be able to open to completely different opinions, to be open to different perspectives, to ask what other industries and what other professionals outside the security and resilience industries are doing. It's about attending some of those conferences. It's about reading books. It's about reading, I wouldn't say the media, because that's what we do in our job, but maybe read different kinds of media, so that instead of just going at the media and say, okay, let's see what's going on in the world today, let's see what the next crisis is, or the next incident is, let's go with the media and with okay, what can I learn today with the media? Because there are things to learn, right? It's not all bad about the media. So it's a bit of everything, really, Alex, but coming with this beginner's mind and being willing to say, oh, I didn't know about this. Maybe I should, instead of rejecting something and judging it because we don't know about something, or we feel sometimes, okay, we feel how can I say, judged for the past work we have done. Okay, maybe I can learn something from this and see if there's something to it, right? So it's a bit of everything, really, Alex. There's no one size fits all approach. And even though in the corporate sector now, the workforce is really about just-in-time learning and about virtual experiences, because without this virtual world, basically, I don't think you and I would have met, because I would have not done the BCI virtual conferences, so I would have done it maybe in person, but I don't even know about this. So yeah, it's a bit of everything, really, but really getting up in the morning, and this is actually one of the first teachings I got from my first VP of security when I had my first job back in New York. Every day when you get up, ask yourself, am I doing the right thing?
Yeah, it's interesting that you were talking about all those different learning potential possibilities there, because I've been doing Voice America for 5 years now, and the YouTube channel for a year. And there was a time when I used to call myself an expert as well. However, after talking with people like yourself and many others in the industry, because we have so many different backgrounds and so many different roles in our organizations, whether we're self-employed or vice president or CEOs I've had on the show as well, we all have our own experiences to learn from and to share. So I don't call myself an expert anymore, because the last 5 years, I think every time I'm sitting down in front of this camera or in front of this microphone, I'm learning something new every day. Yeah. And I'm going to learn something new from, by talking to you, because you've got different perspectives and a different background than I do. And I think that's fantastic. That's the way. And you mentioned reading, and anyone who's listened to the show or watched the videos knows that I'm a huge reader. I've always got 2 or 3 books on the go at any given time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like the same. So I know exactly. And we forgot about podcasts as well, right? Because today we can learn a lot of things through podcasts if we don't have the time to sit down and read, right? Podcasts are a huge tool right now to learn new stuff from around the world, really, literally.
Yeah, and that's the nice thing. How often beforehand, before we really kind of had Zoom and Teams and other different software and applications that are out there, how would we have met and been able to share experiences? You mentioned BCI World, which would have been held in the UK. I think it would have been Birmingham again. If I had been able to be there, it doesn't mean you and I would have met. We could have just passed each other in the hallway on the way to 2 different sessions, speaking sessions, and never met. But because of podcasts and because of different ways of now being able to communicate and learn from each other, we're able to sit here and share ideas right now.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also what this virtual world has allowed us to do is really to break barriers, mental barriers, to say, okay, no, how could I have a conversation with that person and she's halfway around the world? What's the point in me, getting to know her or getting to know him, because we'll never work together, basically. And I believe this virtual world has opened so many opportunities like this, where people are not shy to communicate with each other, and really, it's just, okay, let's go for it. You're in India, it's fine. You're in Canada, that's fine. I'm in France, it's fine. Just let's have a chat and let's see what, how we can grow together and learn together and help each other out, because that's also what the deal is about here. It's really about helping each other out grow and being open to that, right? Because your questions also help me grow. And that's all what it is. We want to stay relevant. It's not only you. When I say you, it's a generic you, right?
Yeah.
We want to stay relevant is asking the right questions. And to be honest with you, that's really hit me since I've become a business owner. It's one of the biggest lessons learned of me as a business owner is every day asking questions about what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, and why I'm doing it. And because when I was before sitting as an employee, whether I was a regional security manager, whether I was a head of resilience, whether I was a supervisor in security, whatever role I was in, I can say it's comfortable, right? I'm always doing my job. I was doing it quite well, I believe. It was a comfortable situation, even if I have tended to ask questions for myself very often. But since I've become a business owner, when you become a business owner, if you don't ask those questions, you basically die. So, and especially with the COVID crisis, right?
Yeah.
I don't know of any business owner who hasn't had to review everything and rethink everything since the COVID crisis started. So that's also why today I come to the show with much more, I would say, ideas and thoughts, which I think are super valuable for the industry, because I'm still in the industry. And if I want to serve my clients well, I believe some of, those takeaways could be highly useful, basically.
You had an interesting word there, feeling comfortable in our positions. Do you think that's why sometimes there's so much pushback when people have new and fresh ideas to move us forward? Because let's face it, a few years ago, the adaptive business continuity guys, David and Mark, when they suggested either getting rid of the BIA or changing the way the BIA was done, there was such a fuss about it. Is it because we were comfortable and complacent and we weren't really learning new ideas?
It's interesting. It's interesting because I met David at the BCI conference in person back in 2017, I think. It's 2017. And his ABC program was was still quite new. And I remember very clearly having this conversation in one of the halls of the BCI conferences. I was so like, wow, you are onto something. It's all about being adaptable. At the time I was head of resilience with Felix Lighting. It's all about being adaptable and, looking for new ways of doing things. And I'm so glad that their methodology has bloomed since, right? Because I think this is it. And going back to your question, No one likes change. It's super uncomfortable for everyone because our brain hasn't been wired for that. Our brain, first of all, likes to be, the brain has been basically built to, first of all, take care of what's inside of us to make sure we survive. So the brain wants to work at the minimum efficiency level with everything that's not useful to our survival. So changing the methodology for business continuity or crisis management is indeed, perceived by the brain as completely useless, right? So the brain dismisses it. I know I'm taking super shortcuts here, and some people would kill me for that, but I'm fine with that. I'm taking full responsibility for what I'm saying. But really, no one likes change because it's part of who we are as human beings, right? And the other thing is, part of the brain that we have is whenever we feel that something could threaten our survival, indeed, we either feel fear or sadness, but we immediately react to it. And of course, I can understand that some of us can feel threatened by those changes in the industry. Maybe I'm going to lose my job. Maybe I'm going to be, made redundant. Maybe my role won't exist anymore because someone somewhere else will take it, whatever it is. And I can completely understand that. But fighting change is like fighting gravity, basically, right? If something is meant to change, and I think the will is turning at this very moment, so there's nothing we can do about it. I've decided and made the decision to jump on the wheel and turn with it, right? And see where it leads me. And I think for the people who try to stop the wheel, I think it's a mistake. I think it's a mistake because, like I said, fighting change is like fighting gravity, basically. And I'm not saying that wherever we are heading in our industry, we are right by all means, right? But I think it's also good to iterate. And I think our job is meant to be iteration, right? It's like we do in crisis management, business continuity. Everything is a cycle. We try and we test and we re-prepare and it's a cycle all the time. So let's try something different, because every security and resilience leader I've been speaking with lately, at least one-on-one, but sometimes around my roundtables, executive roundtables that I have, feels the need for change. So I'm fine for keeping things where they are, but I don't think that makes sense, and I don't think we would be relevant anymore doing this.
Well, yeah, doing the same thing over and over again will get you the same results over and over again. Exactly. You're not going to actually be moving forward. And let's face it, organizations, time moves forward. You got to follow it. And as new innovations come in, new dependencies are created, new tools are created, you got to adapt to it. If you don't, you're going to fall behind. As an individual, as a company, as a community, whatever it may be, you fall behind.
And it's like I was saying before, comparing this with me being a business owner, every business owner, every CEO, even though that person may have not built the business they're leading today, know that businesses are made of cycles as well. Everything is meant to be transformed. Everything is meant to grow, basically. So I'm not on the side of, making sure that things stay still. It's not me, and I don't believe this is the right approach. It's definitely not, no.
I agree completely. On that note, we've come to the end of our first segment. We are talking with Alexandra Hoffmann today about what opportunities we have in our industry to stay relevant, and we will be right back. Welcome back to the show. Today, we are talking with Alexandra Hoffmann on the topic of what opportunities we have in our industry to stay relevant. Alexandra, can we take the learning part a step further? And I know we have a list of bullet points here, and one of them was diversity. Can you touch on that to build upon what we talked about in learning?
Sure, Alex. Thank you very much for asking. Diversity is a huge topic for me. I think pretty naturally, because I'm a woman in this industry, and it's not so common, even though there are more and more women in the industry, which is great. But I remember when I started in the industry, being a woman of 24 years old, it was, and being also a civilian, I was actually checking all the boxes of the diversity criteria at the time when my boss hired me then. And still to this day, it's still a huge topic, because I believe if we want to learn, we have to surround ourselves with people from who are different from us. That's as simple as that. And here I'm not talking about colors and gender and anything like that. I'm just talking about people from different background, people from with a different experience and different way of thinking. Because if we just staying among ourselves, what different opinion are we going to get when we need to make harsh decisions, right?
Yeah.
How can we? Of course it's going to be super easy to reach a consensus that way, but is it really what we want? To reach a consensus in 2 seconds because no one has challenged what we want to do, especially in the midst of a crisis or in the midst of an incident or of any disruptive event, right? And I'm talking about a disruptive event here, but that's also true before. We were talking about different methodologies around business continuity, but also around different topics in our industry. I think it's super important to feed ourselves and our soul, I would say, with other methodologies. This is how we, again, grow and build new stuff, right? And so that diversity of thinking, this is really what it is for me. That diversity of thinking is absolutely critical. This is also why in my company, I'm trying to surround myself with people who would be very unexpected in the industry. And to me, this is the cherry on the cake of what I do, basically, right? Is to even people I don't know, but just, throwing a quote out there sometime that will be completely unexpected, right? So yeah, diversity of thought is just the most important thing, I think.
It is that I've been in, this has probably happened to you too, been in meetings where everyone is trying to find consensus and no new ideas are coming in. And then somebody who barely talks in a meeting or rarely attends a meeting sometimes just shows up and says, well, what about XYZ? Yeah. And everyone kind of looks at themselves and goes, yeah, why, how come we didn't think of that? So, how do you explain that to a bunch of people who say, yeah, we're diverse, but yet at the same time, those people that speak up once in a while are saying, oh, that's just a troublemaker. That's not diversity.
So the thing is, sometimes it's comfortable for all of us to surround ourselves with like-minded people, and sometimes we don't even pay attention to it. We don't even, we do it very unconsciously. That's my point here, right? Mm-hmm. And because we don't spend enough time asking the right questions, this makes me think of a conversation I was having with a couple of clients recently. And I was asking them, how much time are you spending on your strategy every month? How much time are you spending on your strategy every week? Well, the answers were a bit surprising, but it was 0 hours. And because they're so caught up by the firefighting, the daily firefighting that they are doing, the constant emails, constant requests that they get, that they literally forget to sit down and reflect on what they're doing. And I think the scenario you just brought is exactly about this. Which, when we are in the spur of the moment, in the spur of life, right? When we have to catch up with everything, when we have to catch up with emails, with what's going on, with the new decisions, with the new reading book, with everything, right? Just sitting down and taking the time, okay, what can I do differently here? Did I listen to everyone? And the other thing is, again, going back to the brain, there are biases. We are humans, right? Mm-hmm. We have biases. We can only see what we know. So what you described is just the confirmation bias, the easiest one to know of, right? Of course, we talk about something and we'll see it everywhere. It's like if I start thinking of a red car, I'll start seeing red cars all afternoon, right? Back at my place. This is exactly what it is. So with the confirmation bias plays a huge role here, and that's also why if we want to stay relevant, going back to the topic we're discussing here, is learning about those things. Because if we think that because we've done great stuff in our life, because we've gone to war, because we've helped citizens go through all kinds of crazy terrorist attacks or any things like this, because we've helped our CEOs deal with executive protections at a very high level, we think we know everything. We are so wrong, so wrong, because our brain is no better than any other brains. So learning about those things, right, and making sure that we have on board other brains to challenge us, and it's accepting to be challenged, and sometimes those quiet people, sometimes they stay in the corner because they're tired of not being heard, basically, right?
True, yeah.
It's just, okay, what's the point of me speaking up when the consensus is always A and B and never C and D, right? So it's but it's everyone's responsibility here. No one's a victim. Let me be very clear here on what I'm saying. It's everyone's responsibility to try and move toward that diversity of thought that I'm talking about.
Now, you just touched on an interesting point. Diversity, that person that's sitting in the corner that feels as though they're not involved with things, or they're always ignored. Their point of view is kind of shrugged off to the side. That leads me to the second word that usually follows diversity and inclusion. Obviously, that person in that meeting room doesn't feel included.
And like I said, it's everyone's responsibility to walk toward that diversity, that inclusion, and that sense of belonging.
Mm-hmm.
I've made mistakes myself in the past where I've joined. I remember that very specifically. I've joined a team, and our way of thinking was very different, basically. And because I am who I am, and they are who they are, basically, we were all very adamant about our way of thinking. So we had diversity on the team, but there was no inclusion whatsoever. I was not including so well their way of thinking, and in return, they were not including so well my way of thinking. So this is why here I'm bringing that sense of responsibility as well, okay? Because it's not always easy, but if we want our opinion to be heard and taken seriously, sometimes it requires, to just also listen to what the other parties has to say. It's no one has the truth. That's the point here. And that's, so the more we are around the table discussing and exchanging and brainstorming, the better. But really here is to understand that I don't have the truth about anything. And, sometimes I'm a bit strict on plans, right? I'm like, we don't need plans, because all of my experience, and each time I had plans and contingency plans and policies in place, they were literally useless. Not that they were not good, but because each time the crisis would hit, it was completely different from what we had planned for. The reality is, along the way, I've came to speak to people who have very different views from mine. So now I've come to a point where I'm like more moderate about what I say about planning and documents and governance. So it's just, finding a midway to include everyone. And but inclusion is obviously super important to me. Like I was saying to you before, it's before we started recording, to me it's kind of a pleonasm, right? To think, of course, if I bring someone completely different from me, I want to include him or her. But indeed, it's not so obvious, because it does require a change of mindset, a change of perspective, which is, like we discussed in the first episode, extremely hard for us as human beings.
So that kind of moves us to another point. Soft skills, then, to be able to manage that appropriately. And I know some people call soft skills human skills, but we'll just say soft skills if it's easier to reference. What kind of soft skills then should we have, people in our industry to show that we are relevant, and that, we can be relevant in the future as well, under crises and under non-crises?
Let me go one step back to answer that question, Alex, if you allow me.
Mhm.
One of the key data that came out with one of the studies conducted by McKinsey and Company in September was that there are 5 priorities on the CEO's mind today. One of them is actually retaining talent, making sure that we take care of the talent in the workforce. That includes the security and resilience teams, obviously, right? I think when I break it down, that how do we take care of talent? Not only, of course, we pay them, but that's way not enough, right? We all know that by now. We also speak to them appropriately. We also welcome them appropriately when we onboard people. We also make sure that they have a great experience when they work with us, right? And we also make sure that we can teach, they have the space to learn new things and sometimes different things from what they do. I believe this very piece among those 5 priorities actually zooms in on emotional intelligence and soft skills, because to have that level of consciousness that we, as leaders, basically, whatever level we are, we have to take care of the people who serve us and work for us, obviously requires soft skills, right? So it's about emotional intelligence. It's about communicating well. It's about managing conflicts well. It's about, because conflict is part of life. So running away from conflict, for instance, is a huge mistake that a lot of managers and leaders have, right? Change management is, I think, part of those soft skills. They're also very important. It's like when we go through life in general, right? Even at home, on the street, when we drive our car, or when we're on the metro, the subway, or the bus, whatever, having those soft skills to communicate and to interact with each other to make the experience great. And especially when we know that things will happen and that those soft skills allow us to build a culture of solidarity. So when something happens, we know we can count on each other. Having those soft skills only during the crisis or a disruptive event means nothing. It means nothing. This allows to build trust in each other. This allows to actually build something together that we care for and that we have a vision for. So when something happens, we'll walking in the same direction, basically. Even if this direction is shifting, it's not the point. It's not the point. We know we're all in it together because we have built this together, right? So that's a long answer to this question.
It's interesting you mentioned culture and working together with certain soft skills when a crisis happens. For years, I've been saying that you have to work with all these people even when there isn't a crisis. Otherwise, when something happens, suddenly you're throwing a bunch of people together who have never worked together, and then sometimes maybe even never even met, all of a sudden have to try and figure out how to work with each other under extreme pressure, depending on what the situation is. Extreme pressure, the time to get anything done goes down, the time to communicate and make decisions shortens as well. And yet you don't know all these people, and it makes it harder to move forward. So it's interesting that you mentioned culture being a big piece of this.
It's huge. It's huge. And when we talk about being relevant, to me, again, going back to what I was saying during the first episode, it's all about leveraging the business trends. What do we do in business to make sure a business is successful? Well, as a security resilience leader, we basically have to follow those trends. Because if we want to be seen and heard as relevant in what we say, if we don't use the same words, if we don't follow the same similar path, I don't want to say the same, but similar path, when I see those tables which are filled with men, I think it's a huge problem. It's a huge problem. Don't get me wrong, Alex, but businesses today, every business is now extremely focused on diversity. So the security and resilience team would be the only one not being focused on diversity. It makes no sense, right? So if we want to be people to take us seriously when we say stuff to them, we have to show that we are on the same page than them, whether it's about diversity, also bringing sense of purpose. That's a second element that's top of mind for the CEOs, making sure that whatever we do, it brings purpose to the people and the company. We can't take for granted the fact that business continuity, crisis management, security, safety is obvious for everyone. We are passionate about what we do, but other people are passionate about a lot of things. Mm-hmm. So we that's why that level of that sense of purpose and having the right skills to communicate what we do, to make sure that people understand why we do it, what we do, what is expected of them. Huge long work in the long haul, basically. It's a long haul work embedded in the culture of the company. There's no doubt about this.
And I think you almost touched on something, is understanding what everyone else does and what their part of the big puzzle is. Let's see, sales, everyone looks at sales. Oh, well, you do this, I'm not involved with that. But sales is actually taking some of the great work that maybe you and your team are doing in security or business continuity and offering that as a service to other customers. And then marketing says, hey, well, then we can try and make that look, flashy and look better for the sales guys to go out as well. So even though it may not seem they're all linked, we are all linked, and we all do work together.
They are all linked. I completely agree with you, Alex. And trust me, all of us in the security and resilience industry, we'd have a lot to learn from the marketing and sales people, because one of the huge questions I hear is that, how can I influence my stakeholders? Well, let's learn about marketing, communications, and sales. It's very simple, right? When I say it's simple, it's not simple, but it's never easy to get people to see what we're seeing. It's never easy. So it requires huge and very very strong human connections that no hard skill that I know of can beat. Basically, it's just yeah.
On that note, we've come to the end of our second segment. We are talking with Alexandra Hoffmann today on the topic of what opportunities we have in our industry to stay relevant. And we'll be right back. Welcome back. Today we are talking with Alexandra Hoffmann on what opportunities we have in our industry to stay relevant. Alexandra, lots of great information. I love listening to you talk. It's obviously your passion comes through the screen. It's pretty obvious. One of the things that we were going to talk about, and unfortunately we don't have a lot of time to talk about it, but I still want to touch on it. The difference between resilience and sustainability, what are your ideas and thoughts on that? What is resilience to you?
That's a loaded question. 10 minutes on this one is a good one. Thank you, Alex. But I know I threw it out there too. So to me, originally, they are synonyms. If I think about these words as a pure civilian, I'm like looking at resilience, sustainability. Okay, to me, being resilient is the same as being sustainable. I want to make sure that whatever is happening, I keep on going. Right? Whether it's for my business, but also whatever I do every day, what am I doing even for the environment? Is it toward the earth, resilience and long life, or is it going to stop life on earth, basically? And it's the same to me for resilience. Is whatever we do, does it allow us to stay up and keep on going and make sure that whatever's going on, will be there for a long time, and again, still a long time. So they're pretty synonym to me, but I can understand that today they've become very separate, or at least businesses and corporations use them differently. And I can see why, because in fact, as I'm thinking about it, it's true that what are we doing to make sure that the company is sustainable? our processes, our policies, whatever we put in place, are they going to prevent the business from moving forward, or or are they going to allow the business to just go through things, whatever happens? It's a big question. To be honest with you, I don't have an exact answer, and I don't think anyone has, especially because even if we take the word resilience, in many industries, it has a different meaning, right? But at the end of the day, it still means that capacity to bounce back. That's very clear. To bounce back to what? To keep on being, right? It doesn't mean that the journey is going to be flat and that change will never happen, right? But it's that's, I think, the main definition we can see even in physics, but also in nature, right? So yeah, it's a difficult question. And the thing is, I know that we like to put things in boxes. Again, it's part of the brain. It's reassuring to have those boxes right lined up to make sense of what's extremely complex. And I think that it comes down to complexity. It's everything is intricate. So maybe some might argue that they're not synonym at all. There's one thing for sure: they are connected, highly connected. Being resilient and sustainable, even if they are not one, they are at least like this. I don't know if you can see my hands, but yeah.
Sustainability, I look at, I like to use or think of food as an example. Every day I'm used to having steak and breakfast, steak and eggs in the morning for breakfast, a big sandwich at lunch, and maybe, salmon dinner, and I have that day after day after day. Then something happens. I don't need that every day. All I need to sustain me, to keep me going, is some rice and some water. And I can survive on that for a few weeks until I can work myself back or forward. As some people say, resilience, you bounce forward rather than going back to where you were. You want to be ahead of where you were, and bounce work towards, being able to get that steak again, in the morning, a steak and eggs in the breakfast. So sustainability, I tend to kind of look at, okay, what's the minimum that I can still keep going, and we could still work as a team and get that steak back for breakfast.
Yeah. But do we want that steak back for breakfast? I'm not sure.
Yeah, exactly. Do we even want to go?
That's a different question.
Yeah. So sometimes too, after a crisis, you do realize, and COVID has done that, and you kind of alluded to it a couple of times too, is when you come out of it, or as you're coming out of it, it's like, what we thought was important maybe wasn't as important.
Yeah.
Our priorities have changed,
or maybe it was a disservice to us. Sorry to interrupt, Alex, but because of your example, maybe it was doing us a disservice, not only being not important anymore, but maybe it was not serving us at all, what we were doing. Because I think, and doctors would agree with me that having steaks and eggs every morning for breakfast throughout a life is not the healthiest way to start the day, right? Because it's super heavy, and I don't think that's the best for the body. That's my take on it. So not only is it a priority, but does it serve us? That's also why I put resilience and sustainability so close together, because, like you said, resilience is not about, like you rightfully said, about bouncing back. I used the wrong word on this one. Apologies about this. It's about thriving. One of the example I used during my conferences is I go back to the cycle we use in the business continuity and crisis management industry. So, okay, we plan, we prepare, we respond, and then we recover. And I typically say that I hate using that recover word, because I recover from the flu. When I go through a crisis, personally or professionally, I want to thrive from it, seriously, right? So I just want to jump forward, literally. Like you said, I don't want to go back. You're absolutely right on this one. I just want to go forward and tell myself, my God, I've learned so much thanks to that. Yes, it was painful. Yes, it was really hard. I've learned so much through that, and now I know I'm resilient, and I know I can keep on going like this, and whatever I'm doing is sustainable.
Well, believe it or not, we've only got 2.5 minutes left. Would you like to take a minute and a half, 2 minutes with any final thoughts?
Any final thoughts? I just want to go back to this, to those priorities that you were talking about a couple of minutes ago. I think it's really hard to make sense and to prioritize in today's world, right? Because we are bombarded by information, including, books and articles and podcasts and new information and new perspectives, new way of thinking. So how do we make sense of all of this? And I think it doesn't help to not be reluctant to change, because like, okay, I'm going to just shut down all of this so that it's much easier for me to stay comfortable, right? To where I sit. And the thing is, it's also a problem because we have so many things coming to us that I think it's hard to prioritize. But the reality is, if we don't take the time to sit down and think carefully through what we want for the team we're working for, or that for the organization that we work for, carefully thinking, what do I want? Why do I want it? And really, what objectives do I need to go through to meet this purpose? It's going to be really impossible. And I'm not talking about risk management here, because and we can only see what we know, and it goes way beyond risk management. It's just, if we want to stay resilient, if we want to stay sustainable, we have to be super clear on what we're doing and why we're doing it.
I agree. A lot of times what we do with business continuity, even with security, becomes a tick box exercise. And I know that gets said a lot, but the more people I talk to it, the more it seems to crop up. Where, well, the reason we're doing it is because we're certified in this and we have to follow this certification. Well, aren't you doing it for yourselves? Your organization, your employees, etc. Oh, yeah, I guess so. It becomes an afterthought.
So taking that step back, always reflecting on this every day, daily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And on that point, we've come to the end of our show. Alexandra, thank you very much. I really enjoyed talking with you today, and I'm glad you could join us from France. And, hopefully the weather is better where you are than it is here right now.
Thank you so much, Alex. I really enjoyed the conversation and especially your questions. And the weather is not good where I'm at right now, but it's fine. It's still a good day.
Yep, it's still a good day. I'm up. The sun will eventually shine. So there we go.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad. And to your point, I'm glad that the virtual conference BCI World was able to bring us together in this platform, because we probably wouldn't have been able to do this otherwise. So thank you so much. I'm glad you could join us today and share your expertise and time.
Thank you again, Alex. Thank you.
You're welcome. And to everybody listening and watching, stay prepared, everybody. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave a message and let me know what your thoughts are. If you'd like to be a guest on the show to talk about something related to business continuity, disaster management, COVID, personal well-being, anything that's relatable to those subjects, you can reach me through my LinkedIn profile, which is in the video description. And of course, don't forget to subscribe. In the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.